Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the East Cambs District Council Audit Committee. I would particularly like to welcome those members of the public and press watching the live stream. As with all technology, there is always the possibility of something going wrong with the live stream. If anything should go wrong, I will adjourn the meeting until the issue has been resolved. If we are unable to resolve the issue, it will be necessary to postpone the rest of the meeting. Brings us on to agenda item 1, which is public question time. Thank you, Tracy. There are no public questions. Agenda item 2 is apologies and substitutions. Tracy Cooper, do we have any apologies and substitutions?
I haven't received any apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you want to mention anything about Jane Bisman?
Yes, apologies, Chairman. I have someone sitting to my right who would not normally be here. That's Jane Webb, our Senior Democratic Services Officer, and she's going to be shadowing me at meetings for the next few months, ready for my imminent retirement in May.
Thank you. Welcome, Jane. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare for any items on the agenda? Nope. Item 4 is minutes, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of October 2023. I have a proposer and seconder, please.
Happy to propose.
Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Brings us on to item 5, Chairman's announcements. I just have one announcement to make today, and that is with members' agreement. I am going to change the running order of the agenda, so we will take agenda item 7, external audits update, before agenda item 6, the annual government statement final draft. So can I please ask Mark Hodgson from our external auditors EY to introduce this item?
Certainly, good afternoon. So I thought I'd give an update on where the sector is in relation to audit of local government bodies and what I am aware of that's upcoming, and linking it to letters that we've sent to Ian on the 6th of December. So tomorrow we are expecting 2 consultations to be issued, one by the Department of Levelling Up, Communities and Housing, and one by the National Audit Office. The first one by DLUC addresses the use of backstop dates as a way of resetting and then recovering the local audit market, with the aim of addressing the backlog that has been in place for the last 2 to 3 years. Within that, we expect them to propose for consultation that there'll be a backstop date of the 30th of September for all audits up to and including 2022-23, with a subsequent set of backstop dates for the financial years following that. What a backstop date means, in essence, is an audit cannot go any further than that date. An audit report has to be issued of some nature by that date, whether that is a normal audit opinion on a set of accounts following an audit, or what is being categorised as a disclaimed audit opinion, where you can't do the audit on the grounds of insufficient time or resources or the ministerial intention to get to that backstop date. The second consultation by the National Audit Office is around the content of the Code of Audit. So what do auditors need to do in order to discharge their responsibilities, with the primary aim of looking at value for money arrangements and any changes to that to make it a little bit more streamlined for the reset, so recovery can then build back up. There was meant to be a third consultation coming out from SIPFA about changes to the Practitioners' Code of Audit Practice, so how you prepare your sets of accounts, but that has been slightly deferred, but it is still expected. So probably the bigger question, or a question you may be thinking of, what does it mean for you? And we've been very clear since the Minister issued his letter last July of what our planned approach would be to dealing with the backlog, because the minister's letter sets out two priorities. One, to maximise assurance you can get from audits that have not been completed. The second priority being to work on audits where it is the most recent financial information. You can't do both. So clearly you had to make some choices along the way. The most recent financial information now is 23-24, so your current financial year. So our letters to Ian and other chief finance officers set out that we'd be doing all value-for-money work, because that remains, you have to do it, because the arrangements that underpin your work need assurance. All pension fund audits in the UK, because they need to be done for any admitted body who needs assurance on them. And where possible, clearing as many historic audits as we possibly can. And that has been the case and what we've been planning to do. And we're now in a position looking forward to how we can then discharge 23-24 audits. What it would mean for you is 22-23 would not be subject to an external audit on the grounds of ministerial direction once the statutory instrument is laid. So we have done 21-22, sign it off. There is insufficient time and resources to do 22-23, so we would start 23-24 and move on. Also, probably worth understanding, if you have a disclaimed audit opinion in 22-23, which is what I've just said, it takes 3 financial years to unwind it. So you have a subsequent disclaimed audit opinion on the 3 years after that, because you have no assurance over the opening balances and then the closing balances and then the income and expenditure account as it flows through the balance sheet. So clearly having the words disclaimed audit opinion is probably not good words to hear, but these, in this case, it would link to the ministerial direction for reset and recovery of the whole of England's public sector audit in local government, not because your accounts have issues with them. So I think you need to think about the two. And when we do the 23-24 audit, it will be important to focus on what our messages are about the assurance we have been able to give against the audit risks, not maybe focus on one paragraph of the opinion wording that says disclaimed audit opinion. This is for the greater good of UK public sector audit to get back on an even keel across all audit firms, across all 600 local government bodies. And it is in the remit of the Financial Reporting Council and DLUC to sort out, and that is at the moment their planned approach until we see anything different. The letter we sent to Ian in December is our approach to that. Happy to pause for you to reflect and ask questions.
Thank you, Mark. I've got 1 or 2 members. Any questions for Mark at this stage? Councillor Horgan.
Yes, you said that this affects roughly 600 public sector organisations. So is that the full number of public sector organisations out there that haven't got a completed set of accounts and audited results? Or because, you know, I've been looking back as things have progressed on this particular matter, and it seemed like only a very small percentage of local authorities, police, fire authorities, all the others in the public sector had actually managed to get their books audited, and some of them not for the past couple of years. So the vast majority of my understanding is that they don't have their accounts audited. Is that a correct assumption? And I guess my second question is it a reasonable expectation that whilst this situation is unavoidable, that going forward, do you have a reasonable expectation that the changes proposed by DLUHC, if I've got the letters correct, will bring this matter to a conclusion for future years? Thank you.
So your broad assumption on your first question is correct. I think in any one financial year, there's I can't remember the exact number, it's in the high 400s, so let's say 480 audit opinions, individual audit opinions for local authorities. As at the 1st of September, only 4 of 22-23 had been signed off, and I think that number has increased to around 40 by the end of December. So a very small proportion of 22-23s have been done. In addition, there are still a significant number of prior year audits still without an audit opinion going back past 2019-20. So 4 years worth of audits in some cases incomplete. So you would not be the outlier, and the majority of 22-23 wouldn't be done, but that's not clearly a good position for you or anybody else to be in. And professionally, not why I entered public sector audit, to not give audit opinions. That's not why I'm here, but we are where we are for lots of historic reasons. I think the proposals being put forward and a reset and a recovery phase are the best way that we as a sector, both practitioners on the council putting accounts together and all audit firms and the regulators working together to get through what has been historically the issue and move forward. We see delivering 23-24 in totality as a key test as a firm and as a sector, and we are ready to do that across all of our audits, and we would expect to sign all of our audits for 23-24 having had the reset and moving into recovery phases. Clearly, there are some audited bodies with significant issues, whether they're governance, financial condition or otherwise, which require more support from an audit firm, but they are, I would hope, on an exception basis going forward as opposed to the masses. So we would expect a very small number in future years to not have an audit completed by the audit deadline. But in any case, there would be backstops in place for each subsequent financial year. So you have to give an opinion at a point in time. It wouldn't drag on infinitum until we're in the situation we are now. So I think it is the only way to break the cycle. And I think reset and recovery are two good words that describe what their approach is.
Thanks, Mark. That's very clear, Rod. A couple of bits that sort of spring to mind, though. You said there's going to be these 2 consultations coming out tomorrow. What's the timescale we're then looking at for the results of the consultation so that we know exactly what's happening?
So as I understand it, they are of a 4-week duration because they are working back ultimately from when they would ultimately need to lay legislation before Parliament to then get to a 3-month backstop date. So if the 30th of September is the ultimate backstop date they're proposing, they've got to lay it by the 30th of June to give auditors 3 months to get there. So it's working its way back. So I think tomorrow is D-Day with a 4 weeks that then enables that rollout.
What happens about what we've usually been charged in the past? If you're not doing any work, presumably you won't be billing us.
So public sector audit appointments are in charge of the audit fee. I would caveat that. So in 22-23, we still have to discharge our value for money responsibilities. So there's that element of work to do, and issuing a disclaimed audit opinion clearly has an element of work attached to it. But to get to that stage, there are a minimum set of requirements you have to do to be compliant with international auditing standards. So there are a set of procedures that we will have to tell PSA we have done, and they will have to be the arbiter about whether that is full rate or reduced rate or whatever. And that is a discussion I'm not privy to, so I wouldn't wish to comment further at this stage.
Ian, is there any technical questions you think I ought to be asking? As in, what's the effect on your staff and them booking their holidays, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I mean, if I can ask a question through the chair. You didn't, obviously we know the expectation is that all pre-23-24 audits should be done by the end of September. That's what's expected to be in the consultation. But clearly then moving on from that, there's deadlines for other years, which I'm not sure I'm totally sure what those deadlines are. I don't know whether you're further up to speed with that than I am, but clearly that does have an impact on staff availability and also about, as an authority, we're supposed to have our 23-24 accounts done by the end of May, going back to the new timetable. But clearly, if you're still going to be doing 22-23 audits up to September, will you be chasing us for information before that date? Or so how does the May date feel for us in relation to when your work's likely to start?
So I think there are 3 dates to keep in, or dates linked to a phrase we need to keep in mind. So one is your preparer's deadline, which is currently the 31st of May. So you have to prepare and publish your draft accounts. And that triggers the ability for local electors to read them and ask questions. So that is currently where that is sitting. Then there is usually a publication date, and that is currently the 30th of September as the regulation set out. So in theory, an audit is meant to be done by the 30th of September. I issue my audit opinion and you publish your final statements. That publication date is in question currently. And then there'll be a backstop date, which is the new phrase, and that'll be 2 or 3 months after the publication date. So if you get to the publication date and we have a big technical issue on your accounts that I can't resolve by the 30th of September, we have another 2 months to resolve it and get to a clean audit opinion, but you cannot go past that backstop date. So if we can't resolve it, then we qualify a set of accounts on the grounds we can't go any further. At the moment, all we know is the backstop date for 22-23 is likely to be the 30th of September. And then for 23-24, we know, well, the consultation is that the backstop date will be the 31st of May 25. So if you rewind from the 31st of May 25, that means they are really or realistically expecting the publication date to be the 31st of January. Hence why we are working to the 30th of November to kind of be more in line with the 30th of September and the norm, to move back gradually towards that. Because I am acutely aware, and we are as a firm, it's not only our year that's been messed up by all these delays, it's the constant audit that you've been under and Anne's been under, having auditors in almost perpetually on multiple years when you've got a day job to do, and that's not helpful. So we want to get back to telling you when the audit is and working to it and having the 30th of November. And we anticipate working back from the 30th of November over the next 3 to 5 years to get back to the original 30th of September sign-off date. Because we, like you, like our summer holidays, and everybody needs the well-being piece, and you need to be able to plan that effectively. So that is why we've been relatively upfront in our letter saying we want to be ambitious and work to the 30th of November with you, so you have a better planning horizon as well as we do.
And one more question, if I may. Clearly, the main issue where we've got to this situation was a lack of resource to do audits from your company and obviously other companies in the market. Are you confident that you've now got the resource to do the audits to the necessary timetable, or is there still issues with resource in the market?
You're right. The resourcing was the first of the issues that affected the sector, and we weren't unaffected by it. But then there's a number of other perfect storm issues going on as well, like COVID and like infrastructure assets. And once you get behind, you need more resource to catch up. And every audit firm is only resourced up to a certain quantum, and you can't stretch that anymore. We are now at full quantum. If we have reset it and we're doing audits from a new day 0, then we are resourced to go. Hence my confidence in answering the earlier question.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any further comments or questions from anybody? If not, thank you very much. We will move on to what was agenda item 6, the annual governance statement final draft, and can I ask John Hill to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the final draft of the annual governance statements. Members who attended previously will know that I produced a first draft. We had a number of questions from members and there was a discussion on that first draft. And members we invited formally, as we've done in previous years, to make any further points. And as you can see from the report, we received 2 further submissions by Councillor Horgan and Councillor Vellacott, which thank you for that. And I hope they feel that we've reflected in the final draft those amendments. And in fact, I've given a summary of their comments and my responses in an additional appendices. So it is here for Audit Committee to approve the final draft so it can be signed off by myself and the Leader of the Council. Members will be able to follow the changes I've made because they're made in bold italics and they've been made to all of the appendices in the previous first draft. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, John. From the chair, I will propose the recommendations set out in 2.1 of the covering report. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Pettit. Members, any questions? Councillor Horgan?
Yes, it was just an observation which I think may have been brought to your attention of a small typo with a D that's found its way into the text.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It has been brought to my attention. I thought it was worthy of changing it prior to the signature rather than produce the document now, but thank you.
Could I ask a question? And I don't know whether it's for you, John, or for Mark, because in the past we've sort of been told, oh, the annual government statement has to reflect the audited accounts. If they ain't being audited, how does that work?
So I want to defer that first to my 151 officer and then to the external audit. Does Ian, do you have anything to say in? Can I refer it then to external audit, please? Thank you.
So technically, your 22-23 annual governance statement is still live until the point you authorise the statement of accounts for issue. So it would be by the backstop date of the 30th of September. And within that, you reflect anything that has significant that has happened up to that point. So that one's live. This one would then be subsequent to that. And I think at that point in time, it goes back to Ian's point, you have to publish this by the 31st of May alongside your draft set of accounts, which are the best you can do at that point in time with the information before you. You would then probably, John, update this in lieu of what happens to your 22-23 set of accounts in readiness for publication of this version. But you can only publish what you know at the point in time that's in front of you.
Thank you. Members, anything further? If not, thank you very much. Brings us on to agenda item 8, internal audit progress report. And can I ask Rachel Ashley-Court to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of this year's internal audit plan. So it's in the format that committee members will be familiar with, Appendix 1 to the report. So since the last committee meeting, we have commenced audit fieldwork on all of the remaining assignments from this year's audit plan. So I can assure the committee that we remain on track in terms of delivery of the plan for this year. So there's a copy of the internal audit plan on pages 7, 8 and 9 of the appendix. So as usual, this details all of the audits for the year and the status as at the time of producing this report. And for those that have been finalised, it has the outcomes of those as well. So since the last meeting, we have also finalised a further 4 audit reports. So these are summarised as usual in section 2.3 of the paper. Appendix 1. So just running briefly through these for members of information. The first is in relation to bank reconciliation. So this forms part of the suite of financial control audits that we perform on an annual basis. For me, bank recs are some of the most important controls within our financial systems because it means that we have assurance over the integrity of our financial information. And it provides a timely opportunity to identify any errors or frauds. And indeed, I have had other councils recently who've promptly identified some frauds purely through the bank reconciliation process. So it's good to make sure that we have good controls in this area. So based on the review, we were happy that there was a strong control environment in place. And the audit testing confirmed that there was evidence of compliance with expected controls in all of the areas that we tested. So overall, we've given assurance opinion of substantial assurance, both for the control environment and the compliance testing that we performed, and a low organisational risk. So a good positive audit review there. The second was also within the financial systems reviews, which is in relation to the payroll system. So again, this is an audit that we revisit on an annual basis, being one of your key financial controls. Obviously, one of the biggest areas of spend is in relation to your payroll. So we want assurance around the controls in place to prevent and detect any errors or fraud within the payroll before it's processed. And for the audit, we focus primarily on contractual changes, new starters, leavers, the processing of the payroll and control account reconciliations. So based on the testing and the review and walkthrough of those processes, we were happy that the processes are robust and controls are operating effectively. We were able to see evidence of reconciliations being completed in a timely manner, and evidence of all of the sample tests that we performed in those key areas provided consistent assurance that those were operating well without any exceptions that I need to bring to the committee's attention. So again, we've given a substantial assurance opinion both for the control environment and the compliance with those controls, and a low organisational impact overall. So all greens on those. And since this report was finalised for the committee, we've also completed a number of the other remaining financial audits as well, which has been positive. So those are all ready to bring to you at the next meeting. The next moves into the risk-based audit element of the audit plan. And members will remember that we had a line on the audit plan for this year around local authority trading companies. So when we came to scoping the review, we decided actually it would be useful to split this out and give an assurance opinion on each of the arrangements because the governance is slightly different in relation to those two. And we wanted to make sure we're giving the assurances in the right places. So this relates to the first of those that's been finalised, which is around the governance of the local authority trading company for East Cambridgeshire street scene. So the key findings are set out as usual in the report. So what we did as a basis, the way that we wanted to approach this audit was to use the SIP for guidance, which was issued in 2022 around good practice for local authority owned companies. So we wanted to almost compare some of the key elements within the council's own governance arrangements against that guidance. And that really formed the basis for our review. So generally, this comparison provided us with assurance that the key requirements had generally been captured within those governance arrangements. So we looked at primarily the shareholder agreement and the memorandum of agreement, and saw most of those key areas had been covered within that documentation. But it did highlight some recommended elements which were not currently or clearly fully covered within those. We've made some recommendations around those of how that could be further strengthened. We also noted the changes that were made that the committee is aware of in October to further strengthen some of the controls. So obviously at the timing of this audit, it was able to take assurance from that direction of travel and the controls that had been implemented at that point. So that did feed into our assurance. What we wanted to see following on from this is the formalisation of some of those arrangements. So we've made recommendations about how that can be taken forward to make sure we're sure that those are embedded and effectively complied with in practice. We also looked at the performance indicators, and again we saw that there'd been an improvement in the range of performance indicators that were in place. We also performed some compliance testing in this area to actually make sure we could verify the integrity and the accuracy of that data against raw data, and that didn't identify any issues or errors, so we were satisfied with the robustness of that performance data. So as I say, there are some recommendations that we've made, and these particularly relate to updating the governance documentation to incorporate and formalise those latest amendments and improvements that have been made. Further developing coverage, particularly in areas like risk management and tolerances, confirming rights of access in terms of assurances and looking at how we feed that into the annual governance statement. Also reflecting on areas of good practice, so things like incorporating the Nolan principles into the governance documentation and looking at the frequency of some of those budgetary monitoring arrangements that are in place. So overall, based on the controls as at the time of audit, we've given a moderate assurance opinion on the control environment and a good level for compliance and a medium organisational impact given the nature of the risks that we're dealing with. And the last was in relation to cyber security. So members will recall that this is an area that we have visited previously. So we wanted to take the opportunity on this audit to follow up on actions that have been taken and progress made since that last audit in particular, and also progress made since the latest IT health check, which is essentially looking at identifying any vulnerabilities within the networks that Council has in place. So we're really pleased to note the progress that has been made since the last audit. All of the remedial actions we expected to see had been progressed, a number had been completed, and where they weren't, we were able to see the evidence of the progress that was being made. Obviously, we don't go into detail about any particular findings in the public papers around cybersecurity, but generally we did make some recommendations about where controls could be further strengthened. But we were, as I say, we took some assurance from the outcomes of the IT health checks and the actions taken on those, the public sector network compliance, and the evidence that we saw against the last audit recommendations. So what I would like to do going forward is I think that's given us a good level of assurance around the high level arrangements for cybersecurity. And when we revisit this area in future, I think it'd be good if we could drill down into some specific risks within cybersecurity and do almost a deep dive into some of those particular areas. And that's something that I'll look to scope when we're doing audit planning going forward. So based on the findings for this particular review, we've given a good level of assurance for the control environment and the compliance. And obviously that's pleasing to see, to note that progress. So also within the report is an update on the implementation of the recommendations arising from audit reports. So on table 2, page 11 of the appendix is an overview of the implementation of actions. So we've had 10 actions implemented out of the 15 that were due within the last period. We do still have 5 which remain overdue. None of those are of high priority. But 3 are of medium priority, and as was requested at the last meeting of this committee, rather than just those that are over 3 months overdue, I've actually given you details of all of the actions that are high or medium priority that are overdue. So they're included in table 3 of the papers on page 12. In the final column, we have the latest comments from officers in terms of the progress being made. Table 4 provides the outcomes of the feedback forms we've received on audits to date, which is positive, so no issues to identify there. And I think that's a brief run through, Chair, of the key sections, but I'm happy to take questions on any of the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. From the chair, I'll propose recommendations as set out in 2.1 of the covering report. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horgan. Members, any comments or questions to Rachel on this report? I understand, Rachel, that on some of the issues you identified, dates have already been agreed for actioning those recommendations. Is that correct?
Is that for the audits that have been finalised?
Yeah.
Yes, so all of the reports that are finalised, so the 4 reports that I've mentioned, all of those have an action plan with them, and we don't finalise the report until the action plan has been agreed, and that will include an owner and a date for each of the actions.
Lovely, thank you. Anything further, members? If not, thank you very much. Brings us on to agenda item number 9. Corporate Risk Management Monitoring Report. I can ask Ian Smith to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. In line with the schedule of the risk register coming to Audit Committee on a 6-monthly basis, this is the update report following the previous report in July 23. The Risk Management Group have met twice since the report in July 23, the last of those meetings being on the 4th of January this year. Appendix 1, paragraph 8 details the changes which have been made to this risk register when compared to the version which you received in July 23. And I'd like to just highlight that you'll notice that 2 of the risks have been split out further for greater clarity. those being risk A6, which is now risk A6 and A7, and also risk B1, which is now risk B1 and B3. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Members, any questions or comments on this report? If not, we're happy, we are asked to note the report and the risk register as set out in Appendix 2. Are we happy to note? Right. Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item number 10, the forward agenda plan. Tracy, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chairman. This is the agenda plan that I'm aware of at the moment. I suspect that this will change in the light of Mark's announcement. So we hopefully then should have some sort of firmer dates as far as other things are concerned.
Thank you. Members, nothing further. We'll declare the meeting closed. See you all in March. Well, I'll see you all before then, members. And thank you, Mark, Rachel, and everybody else for their contributions.